The Baltimore Ravens need a bounce back against the Tennessee Titans, but will they be able to do it? We talk about the Ravens Week 6 matchup with the Titans in London and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We're your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast here. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making us your first listen every day on the show. We're free and available, as always, all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your podcast. Today's crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. And we are back with another crossover Thursday as the Ravens have traveled abroad to play the Tennessee Titans in London in Week 6. And we'll be talking with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans about the biggest stories, key matchups, predictions, what needs to go right for both teams to win. We have a ton of insight coming, both Ravens and Titans. So thank you for tuning in today. Again, we're a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast here on Locked On Ravens. So you can subscribe again, audio form, video form. It's the same show either way. Also over on Subtext for exclusive text conversations, mailbags, and so much more. And I want to give a huge shout out to everybody watching, listening. We hit another huge milestone here on Locked On Ravens, 5,000 subscribers. We hit it. We hit that milestone. It's been something, you get little milestones that are big accomplishments, but I feel like 5,000 is kind of one of those. It's actually a pretty big one. So whether you listen every day or if it's your first time in on the channel today, I really appreciate you for listening, for tuning in, to making me a part of your days and your sports experience. So thank you so much. And I'm going to continue to keep growing the show, keep doing what I'm doing. And once I hit 10K, I promised back when I first started this channel, I'd wear a crazy outfit. So once we get to 10K, we're going to be doing that. But without any further ado, let's now get into our conversation with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans about that big Week 6 matchup.
Kevin, we do got to get into the big storylines in this game. And the Titans are technically the home team in this one, I believe, although both teams are on the road in London. So I will be a courteous guest here, or a courteous host, and let the guest go first. Kevin, what's the big storyline for the Ravens heading into this matchup?
Well, I appreciate that generosity, Tyler. And yeah,
right.
For the Ravens, I think you could go with 2, but I'll go with the sloppiness. Injuries have been a big part of the Ravens season so far, but they're starting to get healthier and they've gotten a lot of their guys back. And that trend is starting to move in a positive direction. But what really has been the sloppiness. And it's come in a bunch of different ways to a bunch of different extremes. For example, Week 1 against the Houston Texans, the Ravens have 13 penalties in that game. And you can kind of chalk that up to, it's Week 1. The Ravens didn't really play their starters in the preseason. It's some sloppiness. And the penalties have gotten better. But then you go to Week 3 against the Colts, and this is all happening against their AFC South over there, Tyler. But The Colts, they start Gardner Minshew. Anthony Richardson is out for that game. The Ravens have 4 fumbles on 4 consecutive drives in that game. 2 are lost, 2 are recovered. And it ends up keeping the Colts in the game. The sayings, don't play with your food. And the Ravens definitely did that. And the Colts end up coming and winning that game in overtime. So that was a loss that probably they should have won, but, woulda, coulda, shoulda. You can't win the games you don't deserve to win. The Ravens didn't deserve to win that. Then in Week 5 last week, the Ravens have 7 drops. Well, they were charted for 7 drops. Some people, say there were 8, maybe there were 9. But regardless, 3 touchdowns were dropped wide open in the end zone from Lamar Jackson. And it wasn't like there was a defender in the area and making a play on the ball and those balls got dropped. Literally, there was no one around the receivers. The Ravens dropped the passes. And again, what they did was they kept the Steelers in the game for that Steelers offense that has looked pretty abysmal throughout the entire year so far. The Ravens scored 10 points total when they probably should have scored anywhere from 20 to 28. But again, woulda, coulda, shoulda. If you would have caught the ball, you would have scored the touchdown, and they didn't do it. So the sloppiness has been so big for them and such a big storyline for them because we could be talking about a 5-0 football team, but we're not because of the lack of preparation, the lack of execution, and with such high expectations surrounding a team that, look, John Harbaugh's not a rookie head coach here. This is a veteran, experienced guy. So I'm not one to put the blame all on the players or all on the coaches. I'm of the belief that it's a little bit of both. You can obviously blame one side more based off the circumstance, but there have been a couple of situations where there have been key miscommunications, like on a free kick, Zay Flowers there catches the ball, gives the Colts the 2-minute warning to work with to put them into overtime. In week 5, they have an opportunity for 3 points before the half. It's 4th and 2. The plan is to kick the field goal, but Tyler Linderbaum snaps the ball when they were just supposed to call a timeout because he thought Quan Alexander jumped off sides. It was incomplete. The Ravens get no points. So that type of stuff, they had timeouts. They could use those timeouts. It's both on the players and on the coaches, and they have to figure it out.
Right. Yeah, they just really need to button things up. And you talk about the sloppiness. I'm sure we'll mention it more. Just looking back at the film from last week of the Ravens, that drop pass in the end zone with, what was it, number 7, I believe.
Rashad Bateman, it's almost like a which one at this point because there were so many of them.
Bateman dropped one. I saw one where Andrews kind of floated out of his route and got in between him and Zay Flowers, and he dropped one in the end zone. So I'm with you. The sloppiness is a big thing. For the Titans, it's not really sloppiness. It's what are they going to be as a team going forward? Because the Titans are in a spot where if they go to Baltimore and they lose, and let's say, I think Baltimore is better than their record, and I think the Titans may be worse than their record. So if the Titans do lose in an ugly fashion to the Ravens, the big conversation and the big storyline is it time to tank? And we say tank, and tank has the negative connotation to it and all of that, but you could say commit to the future. Because if you're the Titans and you're 2-4, and a lot of Titans fans, and I'm sure like Kevin Byard already said it in the locker room this week, well, we were 2-4 in 2019, and we went to the AFC Championship game. Well, everyone is neglecting to remember that there was a big change after 6 weeks, and Ryan Tannehill went in at quarterback. A fresh, new, better quarterback and 30-year-old version of Ryan Tannehill isn't walking through that door. Prime 2019 Derrick Henry isn't walking through that door. And more importantly than anything, A.J. Brown ain't walking through that door. And DeAndre Hopkins is good. I still think DeAndre Hopkins is a top 20 wide receiver in the NFL, but he's not a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL like A.J. Brown. So that's different. And honestly, I should have kept going even more because the Titans' offensive line is not walking through that door. They had their ups and downs, but Taylor Lewan, Roger Saffold, Ben Jones, Jack Conklin, that was a totally different talent level on the offensive line than what the Titans have right now. So if the Titans drop to 2-4 in this game to one of their longest rivals, and it's ugly, coming back from that bye, or coming back from London and headed into the bye for the Titans, it's time to consider playing one of the young quarterbacks. It's time to consider trading some of the veterans. This is a crossroads for the Titans season, this game right here, and that is by far and away the biggest storyline. But with that being said, we are going to move into our big matchups in this game. What are we watching for with positional groups? Who do we think will decide this one? And we're going to give our predictions for this game at the back half of the show. Before we get into all of that, though, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Look, guys, PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. It could not be simpler. Here's the entire process. You go on to PrizePicks, and you look at the projection that they have for each player. Let's say Derrick Henry, 60 rushing yards. Lamar Jackson, 80 rushing yards. Lamar Jackson, 2 passing touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins, 4 catches. Ryan Tannehill, 1 interception. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players and say whether that player is going to do more or less than the PrizePicks projection. You don't have to play against a bunch of pros, not a bunch of bots with 1,000 lineups and all these sharks trying to find some value there. It's just you against the PrizePicks projection. Again, it could not be easier. It takes 60 seconds or less to submit an entry, and if you get it right, you can get up to 25 times your money. Head to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. It's PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. All right, Ravens fans, Titans fans, we are going to continue a crossover Thursday. We talked about our big storylines. Now we need to talk about the matchups in this game. Before we get into it, thank you again for making Locked On Ravens and Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Do want to remind you guys that Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. So that's Locked On Titans, Locked On Ravens as well. Host Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchups, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, you're going to get in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts, including me and Kevin, of course, to make sure that you are as informed as you possibly could be. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Kevin, I put you in the hot seat to give us a storyline in the first segment. I am going to kick us off here with the matchup to watch. And for me, it is all about the Titans' interior defensive line in their front seven against the Baltimore Ravens run game. The Ravens are the fourth best running attack in the NFL right now. I do believe third or fourth off the top of my head, about 146 yards per game. Obviously, it's a very varied run game, and it looks like this has continued with Todd Monken at offensive coordinator. You have power runs, you have zone runs, you have quarterback read option. I mean, the Ravens do a little bit of everything. They have a ton of different running backs that they can use if they want to, and the most dangerous weapon of all, Lamar Jackson. Last week, the Titans gave up 193 rushing yards to the Indianapolis Colts. That was a complete shocker. Prior to that, the Titans hadn't allowed a 100-yard rushing running back in 21 games. And they let Zach Moss, the Titans got mossed, is what I said all last week, because they let Zach Moss look like prime Emmitt Smith. And the reason that happened is because the Titans got whooped on the interior, their defensive tackles. And that includes who I would consider the Tennessee Titans' best player, and that's Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons did not have a good game. He's dealing with an ankle injury, dealing with a shoulder injury he picked up. He got pushed around. The Titans are without their starting nose tackle, Tier Tart, in that game. He's injured with a knee injury. They had Kyle Pecco, Jaleel Johnson, Naquan Jones, practice squad guys, and backup interior defensive linemen, and they simply got bullied. The Titans linebackers got blocked. They didn't shed any blocks. And if the interior trio of the Baltimore Ravens with, I believe the starters still are John Simpson, Tyler Linderbaum, Kevin Zeitler. Is that all correct?
Yep.
So I thought I saw out there. It's hard sometimes with the numbers on offensive line, but if they bully the Titans interior, their two interior defensive linemen and their linebackers, the way the Colts bullied the Titans, then the Ravens are going to be able to run down their throat. And if you allow the Ravens to run the ball consistently with success, you have zero chance of stopping them because they're in advantageous situations in the passing game. Lamar Jackson can scramble for short, easy third down pickups. It just makes it way too difficult. So for me, it's all about the Titans' defensive line, linebackers, the front seven, rebounding in this game. And if they can stand up to the physical test and play better than they did last week against the Colts, then the Titans may have a chance to win this game. But it all starts up front with the Titans' defensive line and the run game of the Ravens. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, you must have went first, so you could have taken that one from me, because that's exactly where I was going with it. Because I'll put a different twist on it, though. I think for the Ravens, I'll go with the pass rush a little bit of the Titans. Now, the outside linebacker guys for Tennessee, Arden Key, Harold Landry, etc., they're not Jadeveon Clowney or some of those guys. Clowney's played really great for the Ravens. Actually, I know a former friend over there in Tennessee for you, Tyler. But
of course he is.
They've signed Kyle Van Noy, who's provided some pressures. The Ravens are actually second in sacks this year. But on the offensive line, when it comes to stopping pressure on Lamar, the past 2 weeks, they've faced Myles Garrett and TJ Watt in back-to-back weeks. That's all. It's always tough, right? Those are two of the best defensive players in the NFL. Yes. And Ronnie Stanley's been a player to watch. He hasn't had the greatest start to the year. He was out for a little bit with a knee injury he suffered in week 1. But against that Steelers vaunted front, it includes Alex Highsmith, too, who I think is a very good player. Course. He had the most pressures by far allowed. He was the culprit on the Lamar strip sack late in the game. Whereas Patrick McCary, on the other hand, who's been filling in, he can play all 5 positions. He's been filling in for Stanley, filling in for Morgan Moses last week when he went down. Moses returned to practice. But Lamar has looked a lot more dialed in this year when it comes to taking that pressure and not getting his internal clock sped up, going through his reads and making decisions. It hasn't been perfect. There have been a couple of bad decisions by Lamar that have been made. But part of it has been sometimes the defensive pass rush just gets in the offensive backfield in like 2 seconds. And even though he can escape and he's Houdini, right? He can do all that stuff. He can't do it all. Like, you can't make Lamar do everything in that offense. So for me, if the Ravens can figure out a way to not let these Titans pass rushers have big Myles Garrett or TJ Watt games, because they're not those guys. I hope that if there is some stifle of the run game where the Titans defensive line gets on track and the Ravens can't run the ball, which I do think it will be a little bit of back and forth. I think the Ravens will have some reps they win. The Titans will have some reps they win too. But part of the reason that I think a lot of people are concerned about this offense is not just because of the sloppiness, but because with the execution, it's not just the drops. It's also the offensive line in some circumstances. Kevin Zeitler had a pretty bad start to the year. He's improved and he's fine now. Right. But with the injuries, there's been a lot of not a lot of continuity where they haven't had all their guys playing together. Odell still injured with the ankle injury that he suffered and wasn't 100%. He ended up leaving.
Looks like he's running in mud, man. I saw a crossing route of his the other day from that game, and woo, man, that's not Odell Beckham.
Well, that was the first. I think that was the first one. It was like a little. He's crossed over and slanted over the middle and caught it, and then he had to leave the game because the whatever injury. I think he just had to get the ankle taped up. And the thing with that contract is that it's not only a this year thing, because even though it's a 1 year deal, they signed on for 4 void years. If he doesn't get re-signed, it'll be a pretty substantial cap it for the next 4 years. So I know there were a lot of debates in Baltimore about should it have been Hopkins, should it have been Beckham. Obviously, Beckham was signed when Hopkins was still on the Cardinals, and then
exactly. They didn't have that option.
But at this point, with Baltimore, Lamar's been better against the blitz, but he did struggle against the Colts in week 3, for example. You want to give him as much time as possible because I can't remember who said it on Twitter, but he had no touchdowns, 1 interception against Pittsburgh last week. It was probably the best no touchdown, 1 interception game anyone's ever had because of all the drops that happened. And the stat is that Lamar's completion percentage right now is 69.9%, right around 70. And that's what the drops factored in. Again, this is a woulda, coulda, shoulda stat. I'm not too hung up on it. But if all 7 of those passes were dropped, he'd be number 1 in the league, ahead of Josh Allen. If all 8 were there, he would have been ahead of Josh Allen. The thing for Lamar that people talk about is, he's not throwing the ball as much. Because in attempts, it's never been that way. Lamar's never been the quarterback to attempt 40 yards, 40 passes per game and have all these deep shots. But if you can open up the field with Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and figure out how to work those guys in a little more and get their confidence going. My bold prediction, Tyler, I did a bold prediction episode. It was Zay Flowers is going to be the number 1 receiver on the Ravens by the end of the season. Zay Flowers is the number 1 receiver now.
He was
the number 1 receiver by the end of week 1. Like, that's just how it went. So they have to have other guys step up. And part of that is giving Lamar enough time to throw this football against this Titans pass rush.
Yeah, and I think just one thing I want to mention here before we go to our predictions and kind of what we think will decide the game. I just want to say that another thing that I'm looking for here is because the Ravens don't have wide receivers, honestly, that threaten the Titans the way that maybe, they played the Chargers, they played the Bengals, who have great wide receiver cores. The Ravens wide receiver group is not one of the better ones in the NFL. The Titans shouldn't feel wholly threatened by that group. I think who you got to worry about is Mark Andrews. So the Titans safeties over the middle of the field, Amani Hooker, Kevin Byard, I think dealing with Mark Andrews because Lamar just has that connection where no matter what's going on, he can find Mark Andrews. And, no matter what's going on, they'll always have that connection they can fall back on. And I think the Titans would do well to really kind of gum up the middle of the field, make Lamar take shots down the sidelines. Lamar's been incredible this year. He's got the highest percentage of hero throws, but also the lowest percentage of turnover worthy throws. It's ridiculous. He's playing great football. So the only chance you have is to try to make him throw deep down the sideline and kind of gum up the middle of the field. That's something I'll be watching for matchup wise as well. But we're going to move forward here. We're going to talk about what we think will decide the game. We're going to give maybe some early tentative predictions in this game as well. Before we get into that, though, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by the Jase case. Look, everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure that you have medication in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery to ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using code LOCKEDON. That's one word, locked on, at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right, Kevin, we are going to cap off this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Titans, Locked On Ravens. Again, thank you guys for making the Locked On Titans and Locked On Ravens podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Titans, Ravens content all year long, all apps, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. Throw a thumbs up on the video if you're watching right now. Titans fans, throw a thumbs up on the video if you think the Titans are going to win. Ravens fans, throw a thumbs up on the video if you think the Ravens are going to win. Wait, never mind. Don't do that. I need likes too. Titans fans, just like the video out of the kindness of your heart. Let's go with that route. Ravens fans, you can like the video if you think the Ravens are going to win. That should do well for you, Kevin. But I let you go first in the first one. I start things off in the second. We'll flip back to you here, Kevin. What do you think will decide this game? And who do you think ultimately wins the game? If you want to give a score prediction, feel free. If you don't, that's fine. Different people feel different ways about it.
Yeah, I know. Score predictions are a little funny sometimes, especially because
Right.
I like to take the whole week, but I'll give a tentative one at the end here. I think for the Ravens and the Titans, I think whoever has the more consistent game and whoever can get off to a fast start and hold momentum. Because for the Ravens, from the Ravens side of things here, we've seen a couple of different ways this offense has played out over the course of the first 5 weeks. They've either started fast, like a great first drive or a great second drive, and then they've kind of fizzled out over the rest of the game, or they've started slow and then they've picked it up either later in the first half or in the second half. I think what I would like to see from the Ravens side of things, and what would be key if either team were able to do it, is if you can get a touchdown on the board early or a couple field goals on the board early, you can't just fizzle out after that. You have to continue the momentum, and that includes putting both your offense and your defense in good spots. One thing the Ravens have not been doing offensively is putting their defense in good spots with the mistakes, the turnovers, the penalties. The Ravens defense has played pretty lights out this year. I would not be surprised if Mike Macdonald gets a couple of head coaching calls this offseason because of how good he has been. And obviously all in Baltimore would not like that to happen. They'd like to have him there for as long as possible. But he's been that good with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. And now they have Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Williams back. And they're starting to get most of their players in. They've done enough to win these football games. 15 points, which is ultimately how much the Steelers offense scored. 15 points should be enough to win you a football game if you have Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and all those guys. The Ravens score 10 against the Colts. It should be enough to win you a football game so the defense holds Gardner Minshew. Kyle Hamilton sets the record for the most sacks in the first half by a defensive back, but you can't win the game because of the sloppiness and the turnovers. So if the Titans can be consistent, if the Ravens can be consistent, to me, for the Ravens side of things, the defense is playing well. And against Ryan Tannehill, obviously you have to key in on Derrick Henry, make sure he can't get going, and obviously stop DeAndre Hopkins and focus on him. But your offense also has to respond off those opportunities that your defense gives you. So the key to me is, again, getting Lamar in a rhythm early for the Ravens, getting the run game going, and not making the Titans make you one-dimensional. If the Titans can take away the run game based off of all their defensive performances that way, obviously except for what happened last week.
Right.
If they can do that, then it's more on Lamar in the passing offense, which is fine because the reason that you got rid of Greg Roman and brought Todd Monken in if you're Baltimore was to further that passing game and not completely get away from yourself in the running game. And so the sloppiness, as I mentioned in the first segment, it comes from the coaches, it comes from the players. It's not just one specific player, one specific unit. But you have to be consistent with it because these games can be crazy in the fourth quarter where one team is dominating and then flip of a switch and all of a sudden things change.
You know what, Kevin? The Titans need the Ravens to be sloppy, be messy. Just do all of that. That's what the Titans kind of need. The Ravens to beat themselves is what the Titans need. And where that's going to manifest, as you know, is turnovers. The Ravens have lost the turnover battle in both their losses. I believe they're 5-1, 5-1 turnover ratio in their losses this year. So when the Ravens lose, it's because you turn them over. Lamar is cooking right now. So if you don't turn over them, they're going to get too many scoring opportunities. They're going to be able to put too many points on the board. It's just going to be impossible for the Titans offense to keep up if they don't force some turnovers. Not only that, but like you said, the Ravens defense is fantastic. And the Titans offense is going to need a little bit of help. They're going to need some short fields. They've been terrible in the red zone somehow, despite being a good red zone offense for years and years and years. All of a sudden, they're terrible in the red zone now. That's confusing, but either way, with the red zone offense, with the offense in general, the Titans are going to need the defense to force some turnovers. Anytime that the Titans have beaten the Ravens, they've gotten some turnovers, except for That one time that A.J. Brown just went absolutely insane and carried the entire Ravens defense on his back in the end zone. But for some reason, that guy wasn't worth $20 million a year, and he needed to be traded for Treylon Burks, who probably will not be playing in this game. It's just so Ravens fans know. So for me, all this comes down to is, will the Ravens beat themselves? The Ravens are the far better football team. If they beat themselves, the Titans can win. If they don't, they play clean football, the Titans don't have a chance to win. I think the Ravens do commit a turnover just because there's a little bit of sloppiness early on, but I just don't think that the Titans are as good as the Ravens. I think the Ravens are a lot better football team. This is a neutral game that should have been a home game for the Titans, so they lose there. And the Ravens are playing it smart, and they're going out on Monday, or are already out there on Monday, so that they can acclimate to the time zone and the environment and all that. The Titans are doing the same thing they did in 2018 when they lost, and going there on Friday, which the Bills just complained about, feeling like they weren't ready to go, and the jet lag and all of that. So I don't think the Titans put themselves in a position to win this game. I don't think the Titans are good enough to win this game unless the Ravens really mess up in some crazy way, which they're capable of doing. So for a score prediction, I'm going to have the Ravens winning this game. I think it is going to be 21-10. What I'll say, 21-10.
All right, for me, I'm going to go, I think Ravens win. And the Ravens made sure that they did things differently this time around going abroad because, as you mentioned last time, the Ravens did things a lot differently.
2017.
And they lost 44-7 to Jacksonville. So we're just going to forget that ever happened. And this is hopefully the start of the new Ravens.
Hey, Jacksonville's playing in their home country, though. So, they always have an advantage.
Technically, you're at this point, you're right. I'm going to go 24-14 Ravens. I don't think these abroad games usually get up into the 30s or 35s because it's such a weird week for both teams. So I'll say 24-14 Ravens. I think the Ravens, this is a big bounce back spot for them. If they don't win, there are a lot more serious conversations that have to be had, especially going back home to play the Lions on that abroad week against the Lions. Yeah, it's week 7 at home. So they have to get at least one of these two games, if not both. And I think the more likely one is probably this one. And it will be more important because it's an AFC win. So I'm going to go Ravens 24-14. And I'll believe that they'll bounce back in this one.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And I agree with your assessment of London and everything. What I do want to say before we go is let's just hope both of our teams don't experience too bad injuries. Both these teams, the Ravens and the Titans, have been historically bitten by injuries over the last few seasons. And they basically laid. Do you remember, Kevin, when you were a kid? I'm a little older than you, but I think that we're in a similar spot here. The little rug that you'd laid down that was like a map of a city, and you could play with your little cars and blah, blah, blah. They basically laid one of those down on concrete and then said, go out and play on it. So let's hope that both of our teams don't experience any huge, dramatic, terrible season-ending injuries, and let's just hope for health when we're done with all of this.
Major shout-out to Tyler for the Titans insight. I do think the Ravens win this one, but with it being an abroad game, so many weird, wacky things can happen, and we're not going to talk about what happened in that Jacksonville game back in 2017 when they faced the Jaguars in London because it was not great, 44-7. So hopefully this time will be a lot better for Baltimore, and they can bounce back after a disappointing Week 5 performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you again for 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Follow Log in audio form as well if you want to maybe listen in audio form one day, watch another day on YouTube. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens-Titans preview and more Ravens-Titans content. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.